So, A. Charles Mueller did a translation of the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment. I have recited the Charles Luck translation, in which the title is translated Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, but this particular volume gives commentary by a Korean Chan master, namely Son Monk Kiwa, who lived from 1376 to 1433. But what my thought is in this particular series of videos, or more accurately audios, will be to give Mueller's overview of the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment. To some extent, he incorporates the Zen Master's commentary, but for the most part, I think these represent Mueller's comments. So, in terms of an overview, he says that the term perfect enlightenment, as it is taught in this text, refers to an enlightenment that is not limited in scope. It is also not an enlightenment that is attained exclusively from any partial aspect of the Buddhist doctrine. It is an enlightenment that can accept and explain all the various aspects of the Buddhist doctrine. The full formal name of the sutra, as listed in the East Asian Buddhist canon, is Great Corrective Extensive Perfect Enlightenment Sutra of the Complete Doctrine. In terms of overview, Mueller says, the sutra is arranged in 12 chapters, plus a short introductory section. The introductory section describes the scene of the sermon and lists the major participants. The location is a state of deep meditative concentration, or samadhi, and the participants are the Buddha and 100,000 great bodhisattvas, among whom 12 eminent bodhisattvas act as spokesmen. Each one of the 12 gets up one by one and asks the Buddha a set of questions about doctrine, practice, and enlightenment. The structure of the sutra is such that the most essential and suddenistic discussions occur in the earlier chapters, and the more functional and gradualistic dialogues occur later. This kind of structure reflects a motif associated with the doctrine of the Huayan school, which affirms that the Buddha delivered the abstruse Huayan Qing as his first sermon in an effort to directly awaken those whose, quote, roots of virtue were well matured. These advanced practitioners possess the capacity for the teaching of sudden enlightenment, a direct awakening to the non-dual nature of reality, which necessarily precludes gradualistic, quote, goal-oriented practice. In the first two chapters, the chapters of Manjushri and Samantabhadra, the Buddha holds very strictly to the sudden position, denying the possibility of enlightenment through gradual practice. In the third chapter, he begins to allow for a bit of a gradual view, and the next several chapters become a mixture of the two. The final few chapters offer a fully gradualistic perspective. The first 3 chapters are aimed at those of superior capacity, and the next 7 for those of middling capacity, and the final 2 for those of inferior capacity. However, this method of categorization does not necessarily mean that the latter chapters become gradually easier to read and understand. In fact, some of the most difficult discussions come in the latter chapters. The crux of Chapter 1, the chapter of Manjushri, is a discussion of the meaning of the term ignorance, in which the Buddha warns against perceiving ignorance ontologically, seeing it as a self-existent entity. He describes ignorance using the metaphor of sky flowers, flowers one mistakenly perceives in the sky due to an optical malady such as cataracts. This perception of sky flowers is compared to the perception of cyclic existence, life and death, samsara, by unenlightened people. When the visual malady is corrected, the sky flowers disappear spontaneously. There is no point in trying to gradually remove the sky flowers from the sky. The nature of this ignorance is also compared to the situation of a person who is temporarily disoriented in terms of the 4 cardinal directions. There is no entitative blockage to be overcome. It is merely a state of mistaken perception, and all the person has to do is to realize that east is east and west is west. In this kind of situation, there is no system of practice that needs to be installed. One merely needs to see things as they are. Since, in his answer to Manjushri, the Buddha has asserted that the human body and mind and all of samsara are nothing but illusory sky flowers, the Bodhisattva Samantabhadra, in the second chapter, has to ask how, if all things are illusion, one is supposed to remedy illusion using illusion. In other words, if everything is illusion, how is it possible to even practice? And if people become discouraged by such a prognosis and do not practice, how can they possibly escape illusion? The Buddha begins his reply by hinting for the first time that there is something else besides illusion, that when illusion is erased, the unchanging mind does not disappear. He then approves the possibility of using illusion to remedy illusion by instructing his listeners how to separate themselves from illusion, comparing this practice to the rubbing together of two sticks to produce fire. The sticks, or illusion, ignite, and both burn up and disappear. But when they are gone, there is still awareness. He nonetheless concludes this lesson by clearly stating there is no such thing as gradual practice. The third chapter, that of the Bodhisattva Universal Vision, is the longest and probably the best known of the chapters, as it is even circulated by itself as a separate text. Universal Vision asks the Buddha to relax his insistence on the sudden view and compassionately offer some expedient methods for the sentient beings to practice. More specifically, he asks, how should we think and abide? In other words, what sort of mental cultivation or contemplation should be carried out? The Buddha's response is a long guided meditation, starting with an early Indian Buddhist analysis of the body and mind as defiled and baseless, followed by a consciousness-only Hua Hien exercise in the visualization of inner penetration. He finishes with a Chan characteristic exercise in non-abiding, that is, the development of the ability to remain continually unstuck in any sort of paradigmatic framework.